June 19th, 1966. Dawn breaks over Le Mans. The air is thick with anticipation, the kind that makes your heart pound even if you're just a spectator. 3. Ford GT40s streak across the finish line. 1, 2, 3. A crushing, humiliating defeat for Enzo Ferrari on motorsport's most sacred ground. Hollywood painted heroes, but they buried the real beast in the belly of those winning cars. Forget the fairy tale. This is the story of raw American vengeance, forged in the white-hot fury of a personal insult. It's the story of a secret weapon born not just to win, but to annihilate. A cast-iron monster so heavy Ford's own legendary driver Ken Miles spat its nickname with contempt. The 427 side oiler conceived not in glory, but in the bitter ashes of Enzo Ferrari's betrayal. Just 3 years earlier, Henry Ford II was humiliated. He thought he'd bought a Ferrari. Champagne was chilling. Then came the telegram. Enzo Ferrari called Henry Ford II a fat tractor salesman. Ford's revenge plan: annihilate Ferrari at Le Mans. But Ford's engines were time bombs. At the 1964 race, every GT40 blew up by hour 9. The New York Times jeered, "Ford's tractors belong in cornfields." Enter Bill Innes, Ford's quiet genius. His mission: redesign the FE block to survive 24 hours at 7,000 revolutions per minute. Working in Ford's Dearborn Skunk Works, Innes scrapped the standard top oiler design. His solution? A secret oil gallery drilled along the block's left side, feeding the crankshaft first. Mechanics dubbed it the side oiler, and it was so radical, Ford's execs nearly killed it. Why? Cost. Each block required 200+ hours of hand machining, but Innes fought back. If you want to beat Ferrari, you bleed for it. Early tests were catastrophic. At Daytona 1964, Fred Lorenzen's 427 blew after 47 laps. Mechanic Herb Nabber Moody recalled, "Oil pressure dropped like a rock. We pulled the pan. The bearings looked like charcoal. The top oiler design starved the crank at high RPMs. Herb Nab said, "Bearings looked like charcoal briquettes. We found metal shavings in the pan." The crank was eating itself alive. By 1963, Ford was the auto world's titan, but their racing rep was underwhelming. Enzo Ferrari had 6 consecutive wins at Le Mans, and Ford-powered cars were coming dead last week after week. Boardroom lunches became uncomfortable as both managers and engineers scrambled for ideas to beat Ferrari. Coupled with the international humiliation Henry Ford was subjected to after Ferrari pulled out of their trade at the last minute, it was a cloudy season at Ford's plants. But that didn't last for long. Henry and his team of engineers decided to challenge Ferrari at his turf to build their credibility. The turf was Le Mans, a French endurance race known for chewing up engines, spitting out transmissions, and breaking the spirits of the world's best drivers. At that time, Ferrari owned it. They'd won it 4 years in a row, while Ford hadn't even come close. So, how do you take down a racing dynasty halfway across the world? You build something faster, tougher, meaner, and louder. And that's where the 427 FE side oiler story began. Now, let's get something straight. The 427 wasn't Ford's first big engine, but it was the first one built specifically to destroy a Ferrari. Back then, Ford was using a series of engines under the FE family, the 332, 352, and 390, up to the 428. They were good street engines, solid NASCAR performers. These engines took the place of the outgoing Y-block engine, which only ran for a few years after replacing the flathead V8. The FE went through different iterations and was constantly being adjusted and perfected before being replaced by the 335 series and 385 series. But Le Mans was a different animal. A regular V8 could hold up for a few hundred miles, maybe 500, but Le Mans was 3,000 miles in a single race, over 24 hours. If Ford wanted to beat Ferrari, they'd need reliability and raw power. So Ford went back to the drawing board and went to war with their own design limitations. And what they came up with wasn't just a bigger engine, it was a monster. The 427 cubic inch FE was their declaration of war against Enzo, 7 liters of raw cast iron brutality. Though it was slightly smaller in displacement than the 428, the 427 stood tall as the true performance king of Ford's FE engine family and the only one built purely for racing. Introduced in 1963, the 427 actually displaced 425.98 cubic inches, but Ford rounded it up to 427 to meet the maximum engine size allowed by several racing organizations at the time. The 427's thin wall block was cast using a high nickel alloy and featured a thicker deck, allowing it to handle higher compression ratios. A short 3.78 4-inch stroke enabled high revving performance, while its massive 4.23 3-inch bore pushed the FE design to its limits. However, this meant the block could only be safely overbored by 0.03 inches. Any more risked compromising structural integrity. To survive the brutal demands of high RPM racing, above 5,000 revolutions per minute, Ford made several key upgrades. Most 427 seconds ran solid lifters for better high RPM horsepower, while steel crankshafts replaced cast ones for added strength. Reinforced main bearing webs and cross-bolted main caps improved bottom-end durability under load. These enhancements made the 427 formidable, but still not bulletproof. When it came to withstanding the relentless abuse of NASCAR and Le Mans, Ford engineers realized it was time to rethink one of the engine's most vital systems, oiling. The weak link revealed itself on the racetrack. During extended runs above 6,000 revolutions per minute, the crankshaft and main bearings suffered from insufficient oil pressure, leading to catastrophic bottom-end failures. Engineers traced the issue to the oiling system. In the standard FE layout, oil was routed to the camshaft and valve train first, with the crankshaft and main bearings receiving whatever pressure remained. That sequence might have worked for street engines, but not for a race motor screaming above 6,000 revolutions per minute for hours on end. The high RPM demands of racing, where engines were pushed to their limits for hours, starved the crank of lubrication, causing bearing wear, overheating, and ultimately engine failure. This weakness threatened Ford's ambitions in motorsports, as reliability was as crucial as power in securing victories. Ford's engineers, recognizing the urgency, set out to redesign the lubrication system to prioritize the bottom end. Beyond lubrication issues, the 427 FE faced significant overheating challenges. The engine's high compression ratio and massive power output, often exceeding 500 horsepower in racing trim, generated immense heat. In NASCAR, where air speeds on superspeedways limited cooling airflow, and in endurance racing, where sustained high RPMs were the norm, the 427's cooling system struggled to dissipate heat effectively. The radiator and water pump designs in early Ford 427 powered vehicles, such as NASCAR stock cars and GT40 prototypes, were often inadequate for racing conditions. In NASCAR, overheating led to blown head gaskets and warped cylinder heads, forcing drivers like Fred Lorenzen to retire from races they were poised to win. At Le Mans, the GT40's compact chassis constrained radiator size, exacerbating cooling issues. The 427's oil temperatures also spiked, particularly in the top oiler system, where insufficient flow to the bearings caused friction-induced heat buildup. These overheating problems compounded the lubrication failures, creating a vicious cycle of mechanical distress. The 427's prodigious torque, 480 pounds-ft in street trim and higher in racing configurations, created additional challenges for drivetrain components. In NASCAR stock cars, the engine's power overwhelmed transmissions, clutches, and rear axles, leading to frequent failures. Early 4-speed manual transmissions, like those used in 1963 to 64 Ford Galaxies, struggled to handle the 427's torque, with gear teeth shearing under aggressive shifts. Clutches burned out and differentials failed, particularly during restarts or when drivers powered out of corners. In the GT40, the 427's torque posed similar problems. The transaxle designed for the lighter 289 cubic inch engine in earlier GT40s was ill-equipped for the 427's output. During testing in early races, transaxle failures were common, with gears and bearings unable to withstand the engine's force. These issues forced Ford to develop heavy-duty drivetrain components, including reinforced transmissions and transaxles, adding weight and complexity to the vehicles. The drivetrain challenges highlighted a broader issue. The 427's power exposed weaknesses throughout the vehicle. Every gain in horsepower revealed a new bottleneck, requiring engineers to strengthen not just the engine, but the entire platform. This iterative process was time-consuming and costly, delaying Ford's competitive edge in motorsports. The 427's early failures were not just technical, they were public and deeply humiliating for Ford. In NASCAR, high-profile retirements due to engine blowups or drivetrain failures damaged Ford's reputation as Chrysler's Hemi-powered Plymouths and Dodges racked up wins at Le Mans. The GT40s' mechanical woes in 1964 and 1965, where no Ford finished the race, were a source of embarrassment for Henry Ford II, who had personally staked his legacy on defeating Ferrari. These setbacks, dramatized in Ford v Ferrari, intensified pressure on Ford's engineering team to deliver a reliable engine. The corporate stakes were enormous. Ford's motorsport program was a high-visibility effort to showcase American engineering and boost brand prestige. Each failure on the track was a blow to Ford's image, prompting scrutiny from executives and shareholders. Engineers faced relentless deadlines to fix the 427's issues, with the added challenge of balancing racing development with production demands for street vehicles. The pressure to succeed drove a culture of innovation, but also led to rushed solutions such as interim cooling upgrades that sometimes fell short. The 427's challenges were compounded by fierce competition. In NASCAR, Chrysler's 426 Hemi, introduced in 1964, offered superior reliability and comparable power with its hemispherical combustion chambers optimizing airflow. The Hemi's robust lubrication system outshone the 427's top oiler, allowing Chrysler teams, led by drivers like Richard Petty, to dominate races in 1964. Ford's response: the 427 SOHC Cammer produced 657 horsepower, but was banned by NASCAR in 1966 after Chrysler protests, leaving the pushrod 427 to carry the fight. At Le Mans, Ferrari's 330P and earlier P-Series cars were engineered for endurance with refined V12 engines and lightweight chassis. The GT40's early 427 seconds, plagued by lubrication and cooling issues, couldn't match Ferrari's reliability, leading to Ford's failures in 1964 and 1965. Ferrari's dominance added urgency to Ford's efforts, as each loss reinforced the perception that American cars couldn't compete in European endurance racing. By 1964, Ford's engineers, led by figures like Bill Ennis, recognized that the 427's survival in motorsports required a fundamental rethink. Power alone was insufficient. Reliability was paramount. The top oiler's lubrication flaw was the primary target, as its inability to prioritize crankshaft oiling caused the majority of failures. The solution introduced in 1965 was the side oiler block. The side oiler block featured a dedicated oil gallery running parallel to the crankshaft along the left side of the engine block. This gallery, cast into the block's design, allowed oil to flow directly from the pump to the main bearings before being distributed to the camshaft and valve train. The innovation required significant modifications to the block's casting process, as the new oil passage demanded precise machining and structural integrity to maintain the engine's strength. The side oiler's design was a bold departure from traditional V8 architecture, reflecting Ford's commitment to solving the lubrication issue without compromising the 427's power output. Despite the overhaul in lubrication, the side oiler block retained the 427's core specifications: a 4.23 3-inch bore, 3.78 4-inch stroke, and 12.5 compression ratio, capable of producing 410 horsepower with a single 4-barrel carburetor and 425 horsepower with dual quad carburetors, both delivering 480 pounds-ft of torque. However, the new lubrication system enhanced durability, allowing the engine to sustain high RPM operation without the risk of bottom-end failure. The block also incorporated reinforced main bearing webs with cross-bolted caps, further strengthening the bottom end, and a forged steel crankshaft introduced in 1965 replaced earlier cast versions. improving resistance to stress. The side oiler's lubrication system also required careful calibration of the oil pump and passages to maintain optimal pressure and flow. Engineers conducted extensive testing to ensure the gallery delivered sufficient oil volume without starving other components. The design necessitated a high-capacity oil pump, as the side oiler's priority system demanded greater flow to feed the main bearings first, while still supplying the camshaft and valve train. This attention to detail ensured the 427 could operate reliably at high RPMs, where even minor lubrication failures could lead to catastrophic engine damage. The side oiler block's casting process was another critical aspect of its development. Adding the longitudinal oil gallery required modifications to the foundry molds, increasing production complexity and cost. The gallery had to be precisely integrated into the block's structure without compromising its strength, as the high nickel alloy block was already designed for thin wall construction to reduce weight. Engineers balanced these factors by reinforcing key areas, such as the main bearing webs, ensuring the block could handle the stresses of racing while adding the new oiling system. Enzo Ferrari laughed, "Americans build washing machines, not race engines." At Le Mans 1965, disaster struck again. Ken Miles's GT40 led for 20 hours until the transmission exploded. Engineer Phil Remington, Shelby American, "We knew the side oiler could last, but the transaxle, it was glass." Miles raged. "You give me a grenade and tell me not to pull the pin." Shelby's team worked 72-hour shifts. Carroll Shelby threatened Ford, "Give me the side oiler and a real gearbox, or I quit." They delivered a bulletproof car, a T44 transaxle, paired with the side oiler. But Ferrari had a new weapon, the 330 P3A with 450 HP and 200 pounds weight savings. The stage was set for 1966. Carroll Shelby said, "The side oiler was our sledgehammer. Ferrari's engines were watches. Ours was a damn anvil." Ken Miles said, "This thing pulls like a freight train." Finally, an engine that won't quit on me. NASCAR's dirty trick and Shelby's ultimatum. Chrysler's 426 Hemi was crushing Ford. The solution? Ford's 657 HP Cammer so advanced, NASCAR banned it after Chrysler's protest. Enzo Ferrari cabled Ford HQ, "Your engines belong in laundry machines." With the Shelby-developed GT40 MK2 powered by the side oiler, Ford was ready to humiliate Ferrari on the world's biggest stage. On June 19, 1966, 3 GT40 MK2s, driven by teams including Bruce McLaren, Chris Amon, Ken Miles, Denny Hulme, and Ronnie Bucknam and Dick Hutcherson, lined up against Ferrari's 330 P3S. The 427 side oiler's ability to deliver sustained high-speed performance, often exceeding 200 miles per hour on the Mulsanne Straight, combined with its side-enhanced reliability, proved decisive. The engines ran flawlessly for 24 hours, covering over 3,000 miles without a single mechanical failure, a testament to the side oiler's design. The McLaren, divided by Amon Carr, took the checkered flag, followed by Miles, divided by Hulme, and Bucknam, divided by Hutcherson, securing a 1-2-3 sweep that shattered Ferrari's dominance. This victory was more than a win. It was a statement of American engineering supremacy. The side oiler's endurance, producing approximately 485 horsepower in Le Mans trim, allowed the GT40 to maintain blistering speeds while withstanding the race's grueling demands. The side oiler's prioritization of crankshaft lubrication ensured no bearing failures, a critical factor in a race where reliability was as vital as speed. Le Mans 1966 remains the side oiler's defining moment, immortalized in the 2019 film Ford v Ferrari, and celebrated as a win for precision engineering. While Le Mans showcased the side oiler's endurance, NASCAR highlighted its raw power and reliability on American superspeedways. The engine's side oiler design addressed the bottom-end failures that had hindered earlier 427 seconds in NASCAR's high RPM, high-load conditions. With drivers like Fred Lorenzen, Ned Jarrett, and David Pearson behind the wheel, the side oiler powered Ford entries to a string of victories throughout the mid-1960 seconds. In 1965, Fred Lorenzen, known as Fast Freddy, leveraged the side oiler's 500-plus horsepower in high riser configuration to win the Daytona 500, NASCAR's premier event. The engine's ability to sustain speeds above 180 miles per hour on Daytona's 2.5-mile oval, combined with its durability over 500 miles, made it a game changer. Lorenzen's victory marked the beginning of a dominant period for the 427 side oiler, supported by Holman Moody capitalizing on its performance. Ned Jarrett, the 1,965 NASCAR Grand National Champion, also relied on the side oiler to secure multiple wins, including at Darlington and Charlotte. Jarrett's success highlighted the engine's versatility, as it excelled on both high-speed tracks and shorter, more technical circuits. By 1966, David Pearson emerged as a dominant force, using the side oiler to win races at tracks like Talladega and Bristol. The engine's brute strength, delivering torque that allowed drivers to power out of corners, and its high-rev endurance made it nearly unbeatable in races where speed and reliability were paramount. The 427 side oiler's NASCAR success was not without challenges. Rivals like Chrysler, with their 426 Hemi, pushed forward to continually refine the engine. The high riser heads designed for NASCAR maximized airflow, boosting horsepower, while the side oiler's lubrication system ensured the engine could withstand the intense heat and stress of 500-mile races. Ford's investment in testing, often conducted at tracks like Daytona and in collaboration with teams like Holman Moody, ensured the side oiler remained competitive, contributing to Ford's NASCAR championships in 1965 and beyond. In NHRA drag racing, the side oiler showcased its ability to deliver explosive power in short bursts. The engine first gained prominence in 1964 with the Ford Thunderbolt, a lightweight Fairlane equipped with the 427 that dominated the superstock class. By 1965, the side oiler version elevated the 427's performance, powering drag cars to record-setting runs. The Thunderbolt, with its side oiler tuned to produce around 425 horsepower in stock form, was a terror on the drag strip, running quarter-mile times in the low 11-second range. Drivers like Gas Ronda and Dick Brannon used the 427's torque and high RPM capability to outpace competitors, securing NHRA titles and setting national records. The side oiler's reliability was critical in drag racing, where engines faced extreme stress during launches and high RPM shifts. By the late 1,960 seconds, the side oiler found its way into NHRA funny cars and top fuel dragsters, where tuners pushed the engine to extraordinary limits. With dual carburetors, high flow heads, and aggressive camshafts, some 427 seconds produced up to 2,500 horsepower. Though such modifications often strained the block's durability, the side oiler's robust lubrication system allowed the engine to handle these extreme tunes better than its top oiler predecessor. But frequent rebuilds were necessary. Drivers like Dino Don Nicholson and Connie Kalita relied on the 427 to win NHRA events, cementing its reputation as a drag racing legend. Beyond Le Mans and NASCAR, the side oiler powered Carroll Shelby's 427 SC Cobra to dominance in sports car racing. The Cobra, a lightweight roadster with a British AC chassis, was transformed by the 427's immense power, producing around 425 horsepower in street trim and over 500 inches racing form. The side oiler's reliability ensured the Cobra could handle the stresses of road racing, where high RPM operation and cornering loads tested engine durability. In 1965 and 1966, the 427 Cobra won numerous Sports Car Club of America races, including the A Production Championship. Drivers like Bob Bondurant and Dave McDonald showcased the Cobra's ability to out-accelerate and outlast competitors like Corvettes and Jaguars. The 427's torque allowed the Cobra to power out of corners, while its side oiler system prevented the failures that plagued earlier FE engines in road racing. The Cobra's success added to the 427's mystique, blending American muscle with European-style agility. The side oiler's racing dominance was not without challenges. In NASCAR, Chrysler's 426 Hemi, introduced in 1964, posed a formidable threat with its hemispherical combustion chambers and high horsepower. Ford responded with the 427 Cammer, a single overhead cam variant of the 427 that produced 616 horsepower with a single carburetor, and 657 with dual carburetors at 7,500 revolutions per minute. However, NASCAR banned the Cammer in 1966 after Chrysler protests, citing its complexity and competitive advantage, forcing Ford to rely on the pushrod 427 side oiler. In NHRA, the 427 faced competition from Chrysler's Hemi and Chevrolet's big block engines, which offered similar power but different tuning characteristics. The side oiler system gave it an edge in reliability, but its block's limits in extreme drag racing applications required careful maintenance. In endurance racing, Ferrari's P-Series cars remained a threat at Le Mans, though the 427's reliability in 1966 proved decisive. Ford's continued investment in testing and development, including dyno runs and track trials, ensured the 427 remained competitive across these challenges. The side oiler wasn't the only solution to the engine's challenges. Cooling issues were tackled with larger radiators, high-flow water pumps, and external oil coolers, particularly in the GT40 and NASCAR stock cars. These upgrades, tested at tracks like Sebring and Daytona, reduced engine temperatures, preventing head gasket failures and oil breakdown. The GT40 Mk2's Le Mans victory showed the effectiveness of these improvements, with engines maintaining stable temperatures over 24 hours. Drivetrain issues required equally robust solutions. Ford developed heavy-duty 4-speed transmissions for NASCAR, with strengthened gears and clutches to handle the 427's torque. In the GT40, a reinforced transaxle designed specifically for the 427 eliminated earlier failures, ensuring power reached the wheels reliably. These upgrades, while adding weight, were critical to harnessing the 427's potential. Domination and decline. June 19, 1966. 3-side oiler-powered GT40s crossed Le Mans finish line. Average speed, 130 miles per hour. Distance, 3,009 miles. 0 engine failures. Ferrari, all 3 P3s retired. Driver Dan Gurney said, "I kept waiting for the bang. It never came. That engine was a damn rock." Le Mans, 24 hours. First, McLaren divided by Amon. Second, Miles divided by Hume. Daytona, 24 hours. First, Bucknam divided by Hutcherson. NASCAR, 32 wins, Pearson, Jarrett, Lorenzen. NHRA, 15-plus records, Thunderbolt, Funny Cars. The winner of Daytona 66 was not from the official Ford team, but a Shelby American GT40 with Ken Miles as the driver. An interesting fact in the development of the 66 winning vehicle was a correction to the bodywork. The first picture is from the 1966 24 Hours of Daytona and shows the problem the GT40 had. The centrifugal force in the fender guards caused the GT40's suspension to compress, allowing the right front tire to make contact with the lower body of the car. If not corrected, this could cause a catastrophic tire failure at speeds approaching 200 miles per hour. A quick fix for Carroll Shelby and his crew was to cut the area above the tire and create a fiberglass dome to give more room for the tire. Ford was represented at Daytona by Shelby American, Holman and Moody, and Essex Wire with no fewer than 6 Ford Mk2 GT40s. Ken Miles and Lloyd Ruby won in a Shelby American GT40. The after party, 453 drinks, 68 bottles, and 1 cake for the victors. Approximately 200 people gathered at Le Champ-Clair in New York on June 21, 1966, to celebrate Ford's overall victory at Le Mans. Drivers, team personnel, part suppliers, and media members sat down for a meal that rang the till for $2,800. In the photo, drivers Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon cut the 1 cake with Carroll Shelby as part of the celebration. By 1968, the side oiler was doomed. The Clean Air Act strangled high-compression engines. Insurance firms blacklisted muscle cars. Ford killed the 427 inches 1,969. Only 300 street-legal side oilers were built. Mechanics wept as cores were scrapped. A legend was buried. Drivers called it the cast iron anchor. After the 1966 victory, Ford continued pushing the GT40 into the 1,967 and 1,968 seasons. But by the late 1,962s, the high-horsepower muscle car era was running into headwinds. The automotive landscape was shifting fast. The Clean Air Act of 1970, along with tightening emissions regulations, forced automakers to rethink performance. Engines had to burn cleaner, run leaner, and comply with new federal mandates, none of which favored high-compression, race-bred beasts like the side oiler. Requiring high-octane fuel and producing substantial emissions, the 427 became an engineering liability in a suddenly eco-conscious industry. Rising insurance premiums added more pressure. With accident rates climbing among young drivers behind the wheel of muscle cars, insurers began targeting high-performance models, making them increasingly unaffordable. The demand for raw, street-legal race cars began to collapse. Ford responded by pivoting to newer engines like the 428 Cobra Jet and later the 385 series 429 Cobra Jet, both of which delivered impressive performance with better emissions, compliance, and broader street appeal. By 1970, Ford officially ended production of the side oiler, quietly closing the book on one of the most legendary engines in its history. Its life had always been niche, designed for racing and installed in only a handful of production cars like the Shelby Cobra and Ford Galaxy. With limited production and years of punishing use on the track, many original blocks were cracked, worn out, or left to rot in forgotten garages and junkyards. Its disappearance marked the end of an era, the fall of big factory blocks built purely for dominance. But the legend of the side oiler never faded. It lived on in the memories of racers who had trusted it at 7,000 revolutions per minute, in collectors who hunted for usable blocks like buried treasure, and in the hearts of enthusiasts who knew this wasn't just another engine. By the 1,982s, a powerful wave of nostalgia swept through the automotive world. Collectors and enthusiasts began looking back at the golden era of American performance, an age when cars were raw, mechanical, and brutally fast. Few vehicles embodied that spirit more than the Shelby Cobra, with its British-bred AC chassis and brutally overpowered side oiler under the hood. Alongside it stood the Ford GT40, immortalized by its historic Le Mans victories. As collector interest exploded, so did values. A 1,966 Shelby 427 Cobra, once seen as a risky racer, sold for over $1 million in 2018. GT40s, too, commanded seven-figure sums. We have even seen an original prototype at Big Boy's Burgers in LA asking $6 million. The sheer scarcity of originals led to the rise of a booming replica market. Companies like Superformance, Factory 5, and Kirkham Motorsports began producing high-quality recreations of Cobras and GT40s, giving fans a chance to own a slice of motorsport history at a fraction of the cost. But there was a catch. Many replicas came with modern small-block Ford engines. Efficient, reliable, and powerful? Yes, but lacking the sheer violence and soul of the original side oiler. For enthusiasts, there was no substitute. To build a real Cobra or GT40, even a replica, meant using the engine that made those cars legends. Carroll Shelby understood this better than anyone. In the late 1980s, he saw the rising demand not just for cars, but for authenticity. So, Shelby American launched the continuation Cobra program. Real Cobras were built with modern techniques but assigned new CSX serial numbers that continued directly from the original 1,962 run. These weren't kit cars. They were Shelby Cobras, blessed by the man himself. But there was one problem. The 427 side oiler was extinct. Original blocks were nearly impossible to find, and those that survived were often cracked, warped, or simply worn out from years of racing abuse. To bring the Cobra back the right way, Shelby had to resurrect the engine that built the legend. Reviving the side oiler was a daunting task. Ford had discontinued the FE engine family, and original 427 blocks were either locked away in collector cars or too damaged for use. Recreating the engine from scratch would require exacting precision, deep resources, and unwavering commitment to authenticity. The first challenge is the design accuracy. Thankfully, Ford Performance Parts had preserved the original factory blueprints dating from 1966, 1968, and 1973. These detailed everything, right down to the side-mounted oil gallery, cross-bolted main bearing caps, and the high nickel alloy iron used in the original castings. But blueprints alone weren't enough. Casting a new block would require sourcing specialized materials and finding foundries capable of replicating the intricate structure of the original design. The original 427 blocks were made from high nickel iron, a tough, expensive alloy that could endure the rigors of high RPM racing. Few modern foundries worked with the material, and fewer still could deliver the dimensional precision required to replicate a side oiler's internal oiling system. While modern metallurgy offered options for improvement, Shelby American walked a fine line. Any enhancement had to preserve the engine's original feel, sound, and soul. Continuation cars like the CSX 4000 and CSX 6000 series needed engines that didn't just look the part but performed like the original 427. That meant retaining the thunderous torque, the high rev endurance, and the unmistakable character of the side oiler, while making subtle updates for durability, safety, and compatibility with today's pump fuels. Issues like head gasket failures, which plagued early engines under extreme loads, were addressed with improved sealing materials and revised cooling strategies. Then came the cost. In the 1,960 seconds, a side oiler cost around $730, more than double the price of a 428 Cobra. In the modern era, the price of reviving the engine climbed even higher. Custom cast iron or aluminum blocks, forged cranks, billet internals, and aluminum heads pushed the cost into the tens of thousands. Hand building each engine was labor-intensive, and only a small market of high-end buyers could afford them. Regulatory hurdles added another layer of complexity. While many continuation cars could be registered under specialty laws such as California's SB 100, they still had to meet modern safety and, in some cases, emissions requirements. Balancing period-correct power with street-legal compliance required creative engineering solutions and careful tuning. To make it all possible, Shelby American turned to expert engine builders and companies who shared their obsession for precision and authenticity. Using original Ford blueprints from 1966, 1968, and 1973, preserved by Ford Performance Parts, Shelby American commissioned new 427 FE blocks. These were cast from high nickel iron, just like the originals, or from aluminum for weight savings. The aluminum blocks featured in the CSX 6000 series Cobras were 40% lighter than their iron counterparts, enhancing performance while maintaining strength. Every critical element was preserved. The side-mounted oil gallery was faithfully recreated, ensuring the crankshaft received priority lubrication, just as it did in the legendary 1965 side oiler. Modern casting techniques improved the block's structural integrity and reduced porosity, and the classic 4.233-inch bore and 3.784-inch stroke were retained, though some builds were overbored to 428 or even 482, allowing for even more brutal output. Cross-bolted main bearing caps and forged steel cranks, once racing-only upgrades, became standard. Each side oiler was hand-assembled by expert technicians and dyno-tested before installation. Depending on configuration, power outputs ranged from 500 to 750 horsepower, and torque figures were immense. But beyond numbers, the focus was on replicating the engine's thunderous exhaust note and gutting torque that defined the Cobra's legacy. Critics initially questioned whether continuation cars diluted the Cobra's exclusivity, but Carroll Shelby himself defended them fiercely. Built to original specs by his company, with the right engine at their core, they were reborn legends. In 2014, Shelby American celebrated the 50th anniversary of the 427 Cobra with a limited run of 50 continuation cars, each powered by a revived side oiler. The side oiler's return had far-reaching effects. It distinguished Shelby's continuation Cobras from the broader replica market. Shelby's cars commanded premium prices ranging from $120,000 to $175,000 depending on options, far beyond most replicas, which sold between $50,000 and $100,000. Some continuation Cobras, especially low-mileage examples with aluminum 427 seconds, have crossed the $1 million threshold at auction. Beyond Cobras, the side oiler's DNA influenced modern performance engineering. Ford's 427 crate motors and even certain resto mods owe their philosophy to the FE's big-bore, short-stroke layout. Bill France Sr. admitted banning the camera under Chrysler pressure. Mysteries remain. What if Ford hadn't buried the side oiler? NASCAR's ban saved Chrysler, but a 657 HP side oiler would have annihilated the Hemi. What if the side oiler got hybrid tech? Imagine a twin-turbo side oiler with electric fuel injection, 1000 HP, and zero lag. Ferrari's nightmare. But the darkest secret? Ford's own board sabotaged Le Mans budgets. Henry Ford II nearly pulled the plug in 1965. No side oiler, no GT40, no revenge. That block won Le Mans and then rusted in a junkyard. And the real mystery, why did Ford scrap 90% of side oiler cores? This is Paul from Rare Car Stories reminding you to dig deeper and question everything. Catch you next time. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into the legend of the Ford 427 side oiler, don't forget to hype this video, give points to your favorite stories, and help keep automotive history alive for the next generation of gearheads.